January 9th, 2023. The murder of Christopher Morris, boy found dead in a dishwasher on a military base in Texas. The case is...
There has to be more to it than just that. I watch a lot of disturbing content online, but for some reason, this case stood out to me and has stuck with me ever since I watched this video.
There's something about the emails though. They all carry a random name with an underscore in the middle. The name of the sister doesn't match up with her username. All of the details and structure of their writing just seems off.
As I refuse to believe that was truly all there was to this case. So I did the only thing that I could. I took the deep dive, and it has since left me fairly frustrated. Christopher Topher Morris, the boy in the dishwasher. A horrible nickname for the case, but that's what happened. On the 25th of September 2000, Christopher Aaron Morris would be found dead in a dishwasher, fully naked, at the age of 11, in the Shepherd Air Force Base of Wichita Falls, Texas. This case has perplexed basically everyone who has heard about it, mainly due to the investigation being one of the most confusing and frustrating I've seen since starting to make this type of content. But even stranger was the way it was reported, and the activity online surrounding the case, as if you were to look it up right now, you would find nothing. The only search results that have any information is Christopher Morris Reddit and Christopher Morris dishwasher. But unfortunately, everything else you'll find on this case are other content creators with, honestly, not much more to add. Almost everything we know comes from Reddit posts. On September 25th, 2000, 11-year-old Christopher Morris was found in the dishwasher of his family home, which was in Shepherd Air Force Base housing. He had allegedly been sexually assaulted, tortured, murdered, then his body ran through a full cycle in the dishwasher. Officials speculated the killer had done this to wash away evidence. The dad had come home from work and found the racks for the dishwasher on the floor, which prompted him to open the dishwasher to put them back where he found his son in there. After the initial report on the local news, I remember different agencies arguing over jurisdiction of the case, but nothing else was ever really reported on it, from what I could remember. I'd always wondered about the case, because the boy's stepmother was my chemistry teacher in high school. I grew up in Wichita Falls, so it was a pretty crazy story, because nothing ever happens there. According to investigators, at least 5 agencies had conducted hundreds of interviews and logged thousands of hours in the case. This is the oldest mention of the case on Reddit from 2020. Let's take a look at that link. It leads to a blogspot post that is now gone, but luckily is still archived. Child abuse deaths on military installations. An article written on a blog dedicated to domestic violence, the Penal Code Avenger. This, strangely enough, is the only article like this one that I could find on this website, looking through all the archives. It's strange, as it's not even actually talking about the case, only related due to the topic. But for some reason, it's the comments that really disturb me, and seemingly everyone who has seen this case. I lived in Wichita Falls, Texas for a long time before returning to Oklahoma. Shepherd Air Force Base is in Wichita Falls. A few years ago, a young boy, can't remember his exact age, 5 to 7 years old maybe, was found in the dishwasher of his family home, which was inside the base. He had been sexually assaulted, tortured, murdered, then his body ran through a full cycle in the dishwasher. Officials speculated the killer had done this to wash away evidence. After the initial report on the local news, nothing else was reported on it. Very hush-hush. Not sure why I'm leaving this comment, except that this entry reminded me of that. May God watch over the children. This was the first comment, and it was the comment that led into a really really strange snowball effect. Hey all, I am Christopher's cousin. My name is Brittany Scholes. I'm also looking for any and all updated information on the case. If anyone has anything, contact me on Facebook. I am Chris Morris, or email me. Brittany-06@yahoo.com. Still care. Christopher's murder is yet to be solved. I lived great. I know everything. I can't believe what I lived back in 2000 as well. Then I thought it was today. I have no idea. I remember that day yesterday. 2016. It goes on and on like this for quite some time. The vast majority of comments on this random blog post from 2005 are just this. I already knew at this point where this case was going, as I've watched an Expo segment on it, but reading it for myself still feels just as disturbing. Almost all of the comments read the same, and feel so out of nowhere that it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. Why here? Why is the only mention anywhere online about this case stuck in a blog on a niche website like this? Why not on Facebook or MySpace? Those would have made a lot more sense for the time for a digital family gathering. I've never really seen something like this in my time within this genre, and it makes me feel extremely uneasy. Christopher Morris, found dead in a dishwasher, September 25th, 2000. I was 12 when it happened. I returned from playing outside with friends in the evening, and police officers were on our street, interviewing people to determine if they had seen or heard anything unusual. Earlier that day, Christopher Morris's father had returned from work to find his son naked and mutilated, shoved within the dishwasher, one street over from my home. I saw or heard nothing unusual that day. My sister knew him from school, so was interviewed by police, but essentially knew nothing. I forgot about the case for a while, but later in life decided to look him up, never with any answers. There is frustratingly little about this case online. Google searches show his Tulsa obituary, some comments from the base commander in the town hall, and a couple previous Reddit threads. There was even a podcast somewhat recently questioning whether this whole thing might be a creepypasta. Christopher's death has baffled me for over 20 years. Has anyone been able to find any more information about it? This was posted in 2021. The Find a Grave link shown here is strange, and honestly adds even more questions. There is nothing. No information on what happened, no comments from family members. Nothing, except for a nickname engraved on his tombstone, never used by anyone claiming to be his family. Christopher Topher Morris. Christopher Aaron Morris was born the 3rd of March, 1989 in Del Rio, Texas. He moved into a house in the Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita County, where he would live until his death at age 11. By all accounts, he was well liked by his peers at Tower Elementary School, although some uncorroborated statements on a blog post online say he was being harassed by older students at some point. The 25th of September was in the middle of fall break, so all the kids in the county were at home from school. In the morning, Christopher's family went out for their daily routines, leaving Christopher at home alone. Around midday, Christopher's father, Carl, returned to find Christopher missing. He allegedly checked Christopher's bedroom, where he found dishwasher racks placed haphazardly on his bed, prompting him to check the dishwasher. Inside, instead of the dishwasher racks, was the wet, naked, and beaten body of Christopher. He had gone through a full cycle of the dishwasher, washing away any potential fingerprints or other forms of DNA that could have helped investigators determine what exactly happened to Christopher. From here, the case gets a little more dubious. Despite the surreal circumstances of the death, the case was never publicly conclusively determined to be a murder. Details about the investigation are sparse, and those that are easily available are prone to sensationalism. The autopsy results were never made publicly available. However, word along the grapevine made it seem like the autopsy results were ultimately unreliable anyways, attributing the cause of death solely to the injuries sustained whilst inside the running dishwasher. A deliberation made after numerous delays and inconsistencies with pathologists. Allegedly, the clothes Christopher was wearing that day were never recovered, alongside his bed sheets. This post goes on for a lot longer, but you get the gist. This was posted in 2024, and I'm saying the dates here so that way you understand that the mentions of this case, even on Reddit, are very few and far between. But this last post did have some pretty interesting links, outside of just the blogspot and the Find a Grave. It had an archive of the Wichita Falls news article talking about the case. Installation Commander addresses community concerns over death. Our military community has a history of pulling together in the aftermath of tragedy, drawing comfort and strength from one another. We are all shocked and saddened by the death of Christopher Morris. I know you join me in sending our collective condolences to the entire Morris family and their friends as they attempt to cope with their tremendous grief. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but this news article reads as if it is trying to dismiss this case entirely and has almost no detail about the case outside of the name Christopher Morris. It reeks horribly of cover-up. This very much frustrated me. I knew going into this case was going to be a battle. I knew there wasn't much on this case at all, but I needed to make sure myself. Nothing of note was on Facebook. I looked. Nothing on Instagram, YouTube, or anything related whatsoever on any other platform outside of Reddit. It felt so uncanny to me to have a case like this that has seemingly taken the internet by storm as of late to have so little information on it. I started to dig more on Reddit, since it's the only website with any actual information outside of the archive blog and the archive news article from 2000. And on a couple of the posts, I saw some comments talking about a podcast with Ashley Morris. Hello, my name is Ashley Morris. I am Chris Morris's sister. It brings me happiness that people still think about Chris and still care about bringing whoever did this to justice. I pray that one day we will know what happened. Until then, my family will never be whole. After that day, everything changed. No one in my family is the same. We go on with this in our lives in the back of our minds every day, and no one can possibly know what it's like unless you have gone through something like this yourself. So please, if anyone knows anything about what happened that day, don't be afraid to contact my family or the police. All we want is closure and to be able to move on with our lives. Episode 102, Christopher Aaron Morris, from the Catch My Killer podcast on Apple Podcast. In this episode, our host has Ashley Morris on as a guest. And honestly, it clears up a whole lot about this case and makes the physical case, at least, much less of a mystery.
They really haven't looked for anybody else, and they're probably not going to, except for your dad. And speaking of your dad, tell me about him. What's going on with him today? Is he still trying to find out what happened to Christopher? Or is it something that he prefers just to leave in the past?
No, he doesn't talk about it. I know we talked about it years ago when I first moved back to Texas. Talked about it for a little bit, and he just says it was an accident and doesn't want to talk about it anymore. You know, he's like, how many times have you almost died as a kid doing stupid stuff? He's like, that had to have been what it was. I want to move on.
What about the reports that, I know you dispelled them, but I've read that he was found naked in the machine, and that's where I guess the sexual assault allegations came from. And then, of course, the torture and murder probably as well. Can you tell me about that? If it's not true, where did those stories come from?
My cousin, for some reason, I don't know where she got that from at all. It's not in any of the police reports, not in the autopsy or anything. One day on one of the forums where people were talking about him, said that he was tortured and raped and all this stuff. And I don't know why she said it. Maybe just to get attention. I don't know. But that's one of the only things, like when you look him up, that's like one of the first things that pops up. So that's what everyone sees, and they take that as truth, and it's not.
Right. And that's what I have thought all these years. So I'm glad that you finally dispelled this, and I'm glad that people will listen and know that those parts of the story weren't true. But it is true that he was found naked in the machine, though, right?
Yeah. His clothes were piled up next to the dishwasher.
What is your opinion about your brother's death? You said that your father says this was an accident. Is there any way that you think this was an accident?
If it was an accident, the only thing I could think of was him and his friends screwing around, and they put him in there. And then when they got him...
a little shocked that not a single Reddit post talking about this case, or a video that I've seen talking about this case, has made a mention of this podcast in the slightest. It is single-handedly the most important piece of information we have. This podcast was released in 2021. It's not new information, and it confirms a lot of details about the case and disproves others. From this podcast, we can see almost exactly how and why this case isn't talked about as much as it should, and why it never got solved. And yes, it is as frustrating as you would think. During the investigation on this case, according to Ashley, there were 3 main suspects and 5 main agencies looking into the case. The suspects were the father, who found him in the dishwasher, a repairman who had come by that day to fix the dishwasher, and a teenager visiting family for spring break who knew way too much about the case and information no one else should have had, who left to Florida days later. Ashley confirms that the only piece of evidence left was a palm print on the dishwasher that didn't match any of the people fingerprinted during the investigation. She also states that despite claims online, there was never any evidence to suggest that Christopher was tortured or sexually assaulted before being put in the dishwasher.
My cousin, for some reason, I don't know where she got that from at all. It's not in any of the police reports, not in the autopsy or anything. One day on one of the forums where people were talking about him, said that he was tortured and raped and all this stuff. And I don't know why she said it. Maybe just to get attention. I don't know. But that's one of the only things, like when you look him up, that's like one of the first things that pops up. So that's what everyone sees, and they take that as proof, and it's not.
The military police, CPS, the county police, and the FBI were all involved with this case. And according to Ashley, this caused a lot of complications dealing with jurisdiction. And that seems to be the reason this case was never solved, as a lot of the evidence gathered had to be passed around so many times that things ended up getting misplaced or were mismanaged before even being taken in, which sadly is just a tale as old as time. Jurisdiction messing up a case and leaving it unsolved despite being pretty cut and dry. To me, at least, it seems the perpetrator was the teen, who knew way more about the case than anyone should, despite being only a visitor, especially since there was a palm print left at the scene that didn't match anyone who was fingerprinted. I would go on to assume that they were able to fingerprint both the father and the repairman, so it would only make sense. The majority of the podcast shows us the horrors of a family who lost a brother and a son, and the unfortunate reality of what happens when the only person the public can point to is the father.
No, I have absolutely no idea. And if you talk to anybody here, they just think my dad did it. Like, even the cops still to this day just think he did it.
Now, that must have been really tough on your dad to be a suspect.
It was.
It sounds to me like the police have just got complete tunnel vision on this case. It just assumed he did it, and they've never considered anyone else. But if that's the case, what would have been your dad's motivation for killing his son?
Well, because my brother was so hyper, and he was very hyper. He was just a hyper kid. And my dad, with his employees...
The Morris family, after the loss of Christopher, were never the same. According to Ashley, their mother fell into an extreme depression and never came out of it. And their father has had to go on to live as the man only known for getting away with murdering his only son. And once the case went cold, according to Ashley, the town went straight to blaming him. It was ruled as an accident, which, let's be honest, is near impossible, since you can't even close a dishwasher yourself from the inside enough to make it run, let alone have a dishwasher run by itself in 2000. So they blamed him. He was the one who found Christopher that day, and that puts him right at the crime scene. That's all they have to go off of. With no evidence and no lead, there really wasn't anything to report on. And honestly, I doubt the agencies involved would want this story to go public in general, since it's pretty clear they botched the entire investigation, which would explain why nothing ever came of it, and why there's only a single local news article ran by the Air Force Base itself talking about it and dismissing the entire thing. Despite this, it doesn't really explain the Blogspot page, and why it seemingly became a beacon for this case, or why the comments are so damn strange. A theory I've seen on this is that it might be the killer, who became obsessed, but honestly, I just don't buy that with the information we have now from Ashley. With the comments from Ashley on this podcast, the weird comments on the blog from the family are more than likely just that, a family desperate for answers. Why here? Why on a blog post that has seemingly nothing to do, directly at least, with the Christopher Morris case? I don't know. Facebook and MySpace would have been both an easier and better option, but this was 2005. People were not nearly as tech savvy as they are now, and the internet was weird. In the end, with all of the information we know about the case, and thanks to Ashley, I think it's safe to say that we can put this case to rest. Will we ever truly know what happened to Christopher that day? No, we won't. As unfortunate as that is to say, there's just nothing that can be done here. And it all comes down to something that happens in these types of cases all too often. A fumbled investigation ruined by jurisdiction and the statute of limitations. Even if the teenager were to come out and say that he did it, one, it would be charged as manslaughter. I doubt they would get him on murder if it wasn't intentional, and I doubt he knew what he was doing. And two, it's been 25 years. Without much more to add on this case, I'll let Ashley take the final lines.
I would just love for them to, it doesn't even have to be public, just tell our family. Like, if it was an accident, no one's going to go to the cops. We want closure for us. I want my dad to be able to walk around knowing 100% sure that he wasn't murdered. It was an accident. I don't have to just pretend that I think this and feel guilty for not wanting to go find if it was a murder or not. Tell us what happened. We just want to know.
Thank you for coming with me on this journey. And I'm sorry that it had to end this way. Have a good night.